There are a lot of churches out there, and maybe yours is one of them, that avoid updating their branding, not because they don't see it as important, but because they think it's an all or nothing commitment. So that fear keeps a lot of churches stuck. They know that their branding needs help, but they overlook an option that doesn't require them committing to tens of thousands of dollars worth of updates and an entirely new identity from the ground up. Here's the reality. You might be leading a church where all the parts for a solid brand are there. They're just not working together. You can think about it like a symphony. If all of the different instruments and notes are present, but they're in the wrong order or they're at the wrong volume, well, you're going to have dissonance instead of harmony. And that's what's happening in a lot of churches' brands, but it makes them afraid to rewrite the entire thing from scratch. Because a rebrand feels risky, expensive, and permanent, church leaders will just step back and do nothing at all, letting those small problems grow over time into bigger ones. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be that way. So for a lot of church brands, usually just a few simple tweaks can actually be a total game changer. The right adjustments can take your branding from messy and inconsistent to clear and cohesive without touching the logo at all. I've seen this play out dozens of times with my own clients. In many cases, the foundation is already strong. There's recognition, trust, and goodwill built up over years of ministry. But what's usually missing isn't a new identity, it's just alignment. Making sure the visuals, the tools, and their communication are actually working together to support the mission. So in this video, I'm going to share a few things that will help you decide if maybe some minor tweaks and adjustments, a brand refresh, is a good option for your church as opposed to a total brand overhaul. So let's first talk about the mistake that I see lots of churches making. They treat branding like a binary decision. So either you leave things exactly as they are, or you commit to a full rebrand, new name, new logo, new everything. And that dichotomy isn't real. But when people start a rebrand, it feels like they're signing up for a total rebuild from scratch. New name, $20,000 in signage, months of explaining the change to their congregation. And when branding is framed that way, even small improvements feel risky. So instead of addressing what's clearly not working, the churches wait. And over time, that gap between who they are and how they look just widens. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So the consequences of this actually hurt quite a bit. When churches continue down this road of leaving things as they are, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it, over time, practical issues start to become major headaches. Multiple versions of your logo are floating around. Your color palette is being used more like a box of crayons than a professional paint job. Your website feels off from the in-person experience, and more time is spent recreating things than reusing things that were already made. So the brand starts to feel less intentional, even if your message is strong. All of this slowly chips away at clarity. The result is that your members and visitors feel confused. They'll struggle to make sense of the mixed signals that they're getting. And even if they don't explicitly notice that some of the inconsistencies are there, they'll feel in their gut that lack of clarity. So this is the biggest reason I see this happening. Churches think about branding as a change in identity. And most of the time they're right. A church is going in a new direction. Maybe there's new leadership, or they're just starting a new chapter. Maybe they're moving into a new building. All of these things can represent a pivotal moment of inflection where the church wants to represent visually the change that has happened on the inside. But many churches don't need a new identity. They just need alignment. So when the foundation is already solid, tearing everything down introduces more risk than reward. And it costs a lot, it takes a long time, and it requires a level of consensus that you don't always need for meaningful incremental improvements. Think about Cracker Barrel. So in August of 2025, they unveiled this sleek new logo that was immediately an internet sensation in all of the wrong ways. It was intended to signal a fresh direction, but the backlash was absolutely insane. The customers were upset. The brand lost nearly $100 million in value, and within a week, they had rolled back to the old logo. So here's the better approach that I've seen work for a lot of churches that weren't in need of a full rebrand. We started by working with what already existed. Instead of asking what should we replace, we started asking what should we refine. This is what I call a brand refresh. A brand refresh isn't a renovation. It's more like spring cleaning or rearranging the furniture. You're not knocking out walls, replacing flooring, or adding new windows. You're just decluttering what's already accumulated, rearranging what works, and touching up the paint, making the space feel intentional and cared for again. In practical terms, examples of what could happen in a brand refresh are things like adjusting and refining your color palette so that you have clear ratios of colors that are expected to be used more and colors that are expected to be used less. Another example would be to have a set of templates with the logo and colors already in place that people can then use and reuse so that your designs don't look different depending on who created them. These aren't dramatic changes, they're strategic ones. And when you apply them consistently, they build order and clarity without causing disruption. Most people may not even explicitly notice that they've happened, but people will start to feel that clarity in their gut. A brand refresh lets you clean up the clutter without gutting everything down to the studs and starting over. You're not erasing history or introducing unnecessary risk. You're tightening up what's already there and removing what no longer serves you, making those thoughtful improvements that restore clarity and confidence. So here's the real data, the research that showed me how powerful a good brand refresh can be. So there was a study done of around 400 consumers, and here's what it found. 98% of people notice when a favorite brand updates their look. Can you believe that? 98%, almost everyone, noticed when a brand updated their look. And half of those only had a positive feeling about the update if it aligned with the mission and vision of the brand that they already trusted. So if your church has been hesitant to update its branding because it feels risky, the data shows that it is possible to evolve over time and maintain trust without doing a full expensive rebrand. So what does this mean for you? Some churches, even with those issues, won't have to throw everything out. A small intentional refresh can make your brand start to work for you again without turning your church upside down. Small changes applied consistently can make a much bigger difference than you might expect for your church. You'll be amazed at how fast people start to notice and feel a difference. Your congregation will begin to understand and internalize the message and mission of the church faster, and you're able to avoid those unnecessary costs of updating major signage or changing everything from the ground up. Let me show you what this looks like in a real church. Hope Presbyterian is a great example of a church that already had all the pieces in place. They just needed some guardrails, guidance, and alignment. They had a logo that people recognized. The church had a history, they had trust built up with the congregation, and a clear sense of who they were. Inside the building, the signage and material was starting to get a little bit scattered. Printed pieces didn't match. The website felt disconnected from the in-person experience, and one of the biggest issues was that alongside the main church logo, there were 4 or 5 separate logos for outreach ministries, all with different styles and fonts. None of those things were wrong on their own, but they started to work against each other, competing and causing clutter and confusion. So instead of starting over, I worked with them to bring everything back into alignment with the church's DNA: hopeful, hospitable, and reformed. Here are some of the practical ways we implemented the brand refresh without anybody noticing. We brightened up their existing old gold color to something more warm and hopeful without losing what people already recognized. We built an earthy, natural color palette from the existing tones of the church's renovation that they had just done to their building. We also selected fonts that matched their stone sign outside so that the visual system was informed by the existing physical environment. And finally, we simplified how the logo worked so that the ministries could have their own expressions without being disconnected from the parent brand. We didn't change the name. We didn't reset their identity. We didn't even do a dramatic rollout. But the result was something that finally felt cohesive, in person, in print, and online. And more importantly, the visuals began supporting the mission. So here's my main takeaway from all this. For a lot of churches, the problem isn't a brand that's broken. It's just scattered. But for some churches, when they just take that little bit of time to clean up what's already there, touch up the paint, so to speak, and implement some very simple changes, those can start to compound quickly. The clarity starts to improve, communication gets easier, and you start feeling proud of the visuals rather than embarrassed by them. So if you've ever looked at your church's branding and thought, something feels off, but I don't really know where to start, you're not behind. You're normal. Pause and ask yourself right now, is the branding we have broken or just cluttered? Are we facing an identity issue or a consistency issue? If you're not sure how to answer that, that's okay. In fact, most church leaders are too close up to see their brand with fresh eyes, and that's where I usually come in. I help churches step back, get a clear-eyed view of what they already have, and decide, is this something we need to revise or something we need to replace? If you want help doing that, start here. Just click the link in the description. There's no pressure to overhaul everything, no commitment to do something irreversible, just clarity about your next step. I'd love to see you there.